Hello, everybody. Hello, world. I can see you. I can hear you. You all look beautiful. Welcome to our webinar today. I'm Sam Jacobs, the CEO and founder of Pavilion. We're going to be talking about unlocking sales success, winning at every stage with actionable strategies. With me, I have an incredible group of panelists. I'm going to say their names and then I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves really briefly. So, Deanie, I'm going to start with you. Give us a little bit of background on who you are and why you're such an incredible revenue leader.
Thank you, Sam. Hi, everybody. Great to be here. I'm Deanie Mehta, and most recently, I was the CRO at Lattice and took the company from about 3 million to 100 million in revenue. Prior to that, I had a similar run at Drawbridge, and I'm originally from India, born and raised there. I'm a proud immigrant that moved here on a student visa at 18 years old. So yeah,
That's
stoked to be
amazing.
here. Talk about conversions. Let's do this.
Let's do it. It's going to be the most exciting conversation of 2024. I'm certain of it.
Woo!
Ron, over to you. Tell us who you are.
Awesome.
Give a little bit of background.
You got it. So Ron Baden, I am the head of sales for GTM Buddy, and we compete in the enablement space. So conversions are near and dear to our heart. I've been a sales leader for a while. Started with Host Analytics, which is now Planful, through the exit, and then went over to High Radius, where I had about 300 sellers who worked for me, and we did a lot of enablement, and then on to GTM Buddy, and super excited to be on the webinar with y'all.
We're excited to have you, Ron, and I've heard absolutely great things about GTM Buddy. You guys do great work. And last, and definitely not least, one of the most famous sales leaders in the world, maybe in the universe, a man that looks way younger than however old he is, but we'll never make him admit how old he is. We don't know how old he is. We just know that he looks like he's 22. Mark Cosoglo, tell us what you're up to these days, my friend.
Yeah, man. Doing a little work. I just, as most of the world knows, I just resigned from my CRO position at Catalyst, and taking a little semi-sabbatical, looking and exploring a few ideas. And Sam, you said to say what makes you such a great revenue leader is I just read all Deanie's stuff and copy it and make it as my own. It's the shortcut to success. So.
Well, I think that makes a lot of sense. So here's what we're going to be talking about, everybody. We're not going to be talking about pipeline generation. We're going to be talking about how do you convert the pipeline once you've got it. And, here's a little bit of data to kick off the conversation. Then I'll hand it off to Deanie to get her perspective. But many companies, Pavilion and EBSTA just released a benchmarking report. And we've seen that many companies are missing revenue goals because of sales funnel leaks and low conversions. In 2023, 61% of deals were lost to no decision, meaning they made it into the funnel, but nothing happened afterward. So Deanie, when you think about the common bottlenecks or hurdles that you've observed in sales conversion process, what do you think the biggest challenges are, and where do you think the biggest opportunity for improvement lies?
Yeah, there's, depends on how much time we've got, because we could spend the whole hour here. But I'll touch on two that sort of have consistently popped up in my world. One is just a lack of quality pipeline. And a lot of this comes from a lack of standardized definition of what counts as a quality opportunity. Like if you've got, and this changes as your business evolves, right? When Lattice was 20 people, very different operation versus when we were 200 reps and, very different operation. So the general lack of clarity around entry and exit criteria, what qualifies as a quality opportunity, I think is one bucket of things that really impacts your conversion rates. And then two, bad data challenges. I mean, as a revenue leader, we're relying on data after a certain point. Once you hit a certain scale in your business, you're relying on the data that's coming in. And if you don't, and it sort of stems from a lack of understanding on what qualifies, what's entry and exit criteria per stage. I think bad data challenges make it super hard in terms of just identifying and diagnosing, where is the leak coming from? Because there is so many pockets there it could be that it could sort of be stemming from. So I think those are two areas that are really tough.
Let me stay with you for a little bit, if that's okay. So you talked about entry and exit criteria and a lack of a standardized sort of a qualification methodology or definition process. One question that a lot of people have is how many stages should be in a sales process? I've dealt with some leading enterprise revenue leaders that still they insist there should just be 4 stages, and then there's other people that want every moment possibly map to some kind of definitional stage, and then it becomes like a 10-stage process. What's your preference, Dini, on the ideal number of stages? And then,
Yeah.
you mentioned entry and exit criteria, maybe some examples of really good, particularly around the discovery stage. How do we know we're ready to leave discovery is a question I have for you.
Yeah. I think a lot of it depends on your deal size, your market. So much of the stages sort of directly relate to the complexity of the buying cycle. And so, I think, but anything more than 6 stages, I don't know. If I'm a rep, I'm just skipping 1 or 2 of those if I have more than 6 stages. So that's like my typical, like, hey, don't do more than 6. But of course, there's like a lot of it is dependent on the complexity of the process itself. Gosh, the entry exit criteria are I think the specific thing that it has to be objective, your exit criteria around, because a lot of times if you say things like, you've identified pain, that is too subjective on what that means for people. And I've seen those as exit criteria. It's like, wait, what does that mean? And you ask 4 people, you're going to get 5 definitions of what that means. And so having very specific definitions that are objective and transferable across reps is what I find. And keep it simple. I think a lot of times people overcomplicate and have like 3 or 4 things per stage on entry and exit. And you're like, as a rep, I've got enough things to remember. And now I've got 4 additional exit criteria per stage. So I think keep it simple and yeah, make it so that it's subjective and not subjective.
I think that's objective and not subjective is a key takeaway. I think I agree. Mark, you've been having some great facial expressions while Dini was talking. When you're thinking about improving a leaky funnel, what are you thinking about? How do you coach reps to do it? And then we'll go to Ron as well to get his perspective on it. But when you see, again, reps failing to hit target, hit quota, you're not hitting your number, but the pipeline is strong. How do you troubleshoot? How do you diagnose that?
Yeah, well, if I can't blame marketing for pipeline, then I guess I got to look at myself and figure out some other reasons. But no, I think that for me, it's just around the process isn't really managed to. And when the process isn't managed to, reps are off doing their own thing. And so therefore the data is meaningless. And what I mean by that is if every rep goes down and tells me they're stage 1 deals, but those deals are in 100 different actual, stages in the where they're going through, or in how mature that they are, that's where the data becomes meaningless. So I've found that most companies that I engage with when I do consulting or advising, the companies I built when I've come in there too, is they try to do stage analysis to figure out where there's leakage in the pipeline, but their stage analysis is completely asinine because nobody's using stages in a consistent way. Once you fix that, then you can actually figure out where your leakages are. And then when you combine it with what Dini said, which is really strong, objective exit criteria, then you can usually, and if I do 2 per stage, so I'm like Dini, not any more than that is like craziness. So 2 exit criteria per stage. Once I figure out where the stage leakage is, I know exactly what 2 things are causing it. Now it's just I've narrowed the world down from 1 million things down to 2. Let me work on those 2 with a really routinized program. And that's the other thing I see is that people try to fix it with a training. A training is useless. Like consider I go to buy groceries and I come home and 90% of the groceries by the time I get home are bad, but I make dinner out of it anyway. That's like stupid. That's what's happening with enablement is like we're serving up this beautiful bag of groceries, but nobody pays attention to half of it. So they only when they get home, they don't even have enough to make a meal. And so I think that, you have to have a programmatic enablement strategy. And then when you pair that with a consistent way that you manage reps to manage their pipeline, then I think that you can actually do the diagnoses required to figure out what's broken in the funnel and how to fix it.
When you talk about programmatic enablement strategy, tell us specifically what that means.
So I've had a post as people go search for it that is a image, and it's a 3x3 grid. And on the bottom part of the grid is how much mastery I want somebody, or competency I want somebody to have. And on the y-axis is how much of a cognitive load it is. So let me give you an example. Like if I change CPQs and I'm only like, there's a couple buttons to change, that's like a low cognitive load. It's just like, let me learn a few click paths. But if somebody's trying to teach me a new product to demo or change the way that we demo, that's a huge cognitive load for somebody to get over. So what you do is on that 3x3 grid, you measure out how much cognitive load, how easy, medium, or hard is it? And then do you want awareness, competency, or mastery? And then what that allows you to do is it set expectations with your executives. Like, listen, we don't have enough time to do 5 hard cognitive, high cognitive load, and also mastery level stuff. I remember the first time Manny came to me, he's like, we need to do this, this, and this. And then after that quarter, he's like, but people aren't doing this and this. I was like, Manny, there's no human on the planet that could learn 5 things as important as this all in a single quarter. And then you come in and on any rando call and it's going to be right. Like, that's not going to happen. I can do 1 a quarter like that. And then we can do a couple smaller things. And so my enablement partner at the time, Wendy Sinak, and I developed this matrix, and we assigned point values to each of the 9 things. And we said, you get 15 points of enablement per quarter. That means that you can do 1 big thing and a medium thing, 1 big thing and a couple small things. And that way you build a programmatic thing, and something that's big and hard is a full quarter every single week. You have a program around it that burns it into the workflow of your reps, versus the small little stuff that's easy is, that might be just a training or an email or something like that.
And that matrix is competency, or the ranking system is competency, awareness, and mastery, or actually awareness, competency, mastery.
Awareness, competency, mastery on the x-axis, and then low, medium, high cognitive load on the y-axis. 3x3 grid, start 9 points is top right, 1 point is bottom left, and then you number them out and you say, like, this is what I'm going to do this quarter. And if it gets to be more than 16 points, then the reps are going to throw up whatever I shove down their throat over 16 points.
Genius. Absolute genius. Trademark that, sell it, license it. Let's go. Ron, how about you? When you think about pipeline leakage, obviously you work for GTM Buddy, and you all are helping with enablement, but talk about what are the keys you think to everything that we've been talking about.
Yeah. So I was trying to process all the different threads where we've been so far, but I'll tell you a quick story. So a few years ago, we had a big rainstorm and I had a leak on the roof. And like most people do-it-yourselfers, I tried to patch it myself. And like most do-it-yourselfers, it didn't work. So I found out it didn't work as soon as the next rainstorm came. And the guy who came and fixed it, the roofer, he said, where's the leak coming from? And I showed him and told him, and he said, great, now I'll actually show you where it's actually coming from. Because water finds the lowest point. Same thing in the sales funnel. Everywhere we think the leak is happening, it's probably not happening in that spot. It's probably coming from somewhere else. And it's garbage in, garbage out, right? So we've got bad data, we've got bad stages, people aren't using them, and we try to diagnose that and use that as the way to then say, okay, we fixed it. But same as my story, what you need to do is pick your spot, make the change that you think, and make it small, 1 criteria, 2 criteria, whatever number of stages small that you're doing. And then you got to get data in and let it run for a bit. And Mark's right. Like, this stuff doesn't happen overnight. You're still going to have the random phantom hallucination deal where someone puts it into the stage and it still doesn't work. But that's what we're trying to solve, is how do we give people the right info at that moment that they can win that spot, not a deal. So think of it like a football game. Nobody says, I'm going to try to win the game. I'm going to try to win a quarter. And what do they try to do in winning the quarter? They try to win a drive. And what do they try to do in the winning the drive? They win first down. Like, that's how people think about it. And that's the way that we need to think about it as revenue leaders as well. I've watched a million discovery calls where someone starts off with rapport building and they can't even get that right. Nobody says hello. They don't introduce themselves. And what happens? They say, oh, well, the customer and the prospect didn't talk to me at all. Well, duh. I mean, it's like Pavlov's dog. We ring the bell. They know they're coming for food. When in a discovery call, we ask a question, they answer the question, right? So we have to be very good at how we lead these micro conversions in all our stages, or we're just going to leak pipeline constantly.
Deanie, how do you think about enablement writ large, scaling Lattice, going well past 100 million in revenue? What were your favorite enablement strategies to make sure, besides, again, we know that we need good data, we know that we need objective entry and exit criteria, but we also need to, and Mark's got this framework about using points to figure out what are the things that we can teach reps every single quarter so that we're not overwhelming them. But then there's still the process of like, how do we actually do it on a daily basis? Because as Mark pointed out, you can't just do a training, all the food goes bad by the time you get home from the grocery store, and then everybody's got some kind of stomach bug. So how do we make sure that people are eating healthy food, which means how do we regularly reinforce the key ideas so that not just a group of 2 or 3 reps, but a group of 20, 30, 200, 300 reps can scale effectively to help hit revenue targets?
Gosh, I wish I had Mark's framework, because
I
that would have
know.
helped.
Isn't it great?
Gosh.
He's
Yeah,
a smart
I love
guy.
it.
He may
For
not look very
sure.
smart, but he actually is pretty smart.
Learn
It's all
something
about
new every day.
your own. Yeah. I didn't really come up with that. I just borrowed it from somebody.
I'm borrowing it after this one. So
Me too.
no, I think so much of it is the alignment around what is most important in a quarter. Like, I think that is like a learning we went through, because it's easy to say, let's do everything. We're launching a new product. We've got new positioning coming out. We've got new pricing. We've got to train the reps on all of it. And so guess what falls by the wayside? The boring stuff around optimizing conversion rates, because it's not the shiny new thing. This is the thing that's like in the mechanics of how we do anything is how we do everything. I think one of the things where we saw, one of the things that helped was making it fun and making it just part of our day to day for the reps versus a thing that is like driven by enablement or leadership. And so if folks really use becoming really good at their craft as a thing that's part of their job, it's like how we celebrate deals. We're going to celebrate someone doing really well at the craft of the sales process and really figuring out specific plays, or here's how we're going to optimize this specific stage, and hey, this deal was stalled and here's how I changed it. We actually had a Slack channel where folks would talk about, hey, remember that training? Here's what I did. We had spiffs around it to try to get people to start that cold start problem was, how do we take the things we're doing on enablement, assuming we've gotten the right prioritization, the right data in place to make the right decisions on what we're going to use as field time. Now it's, how do we make sure that this is a continuous thing and not a 1 quarter thing, which is another failure mode of, you do this for 2 quarters and then you're like, okay, it's done, going to the next thing. But it requires a sort of consistent reinforcement. So we use Slack and kind of making it fun through spiffs and contests and reps talking about it in team meetings to help that sort of flywheel.
When 2 more questions or finer points. So operating cadence, how often are you doing a training? Are you doing trainings every week? Are you doing real-time trainings? Are you using something like GTM Buddy, which is probably providing, in moment, in call suggestions, recommendation, or plays to run? And then how big is your enablement team? I think a lot of people struggle with, when should you hire a dedicated enablement person? Is it at 5 people? Is it at 20 people? When you think about your journey with Lattice, what are your answers on those questions?
Yeah, our enablement team was about 7 folks.
Wow.
And so it was fairly large.
7 folks covering how many sellers?
They covered all of the field teams, so it's about 350 folks.
Okay.
And we had, one of the other things we did, which is different, is we had enablement report directly into me. Because if it's important and it's strategic, you've gotta make sure it's got, a seat at the table in how we're going to execute on our strategy. Because part of it is like identifying what we're going to do, but the how is where enablement and leadership plays such a huge role. And so we didn't do a ton of tooling experimentation. I wish we did, but it was constantly the question of, we don't have time to onboard a new tool and all the change management that goes with that. But I wish we did in hindsight. And so we used a lot of sort of their existing toolkits that we had around call recording and managers and standardized it. We met weekly, and sometimes it would be a weekly call at the revenue org level. A lot of times it would be at the team level, because a lot of the intimate sort of detailed training happened at the 10-person team meetings. And so we just drove towards standardization of like what enablement was happening at each of those meetings versus sort of trying to do it at like, this 100-person enablement meeting. So I'm a big fan of hiring early for this role. And if you can, have it report directly into your revenue leader.
Mark, what's your perspective on some of these questions? I'm specifically interested in how often, how do you operationalize enablement? That's sort of like the big question. Deanie's talking about, okay, let's push it down into the 10-person, the frontline manager and their direct reports, and let's make sure they're empowered. How did you think about operationalizing enablement? Deanie mentioned 7 people for 350, I think. So roughly 1 enablement person for every 50 ICs or 50 sellers. What's your ratio there? How do you think about implementing this process?
That sounds about my ratio. I can't remember the exact numbers. So I'll say this is one mistake I made at Outreach is I waited too long to hire enablement. I thought I'll just train everybody. And when you start to reach a certain level, you have to coordinate between product marketing, sales, CS. There's just rev ops. There's just a lot of coordination that happens. It's difficult for a sales leader to shoulder all of that. And then also have the consistency in mind of like, oh yeah, like, don't forget to use this framework when we talk about how to train, because that's the framework we use in discovery. Like, it's just a lot to kind of do. So I hired a guy named Jerry Farr who came in and did an unbelievable job for us, probably up to like 20 million, maybe 30, 40 million. I can't remember exactly. And he didn't report to me like Deanie said. So I had no control kind of over what he was doing to a degree. And then they let him go because I thought he was an unbelievable enablement reader, but they let Jerry go for some reason because they wanted a change or whatever. Now, I would say though that we then brought in Whitney, and Whitney was an unbelievable enablement partner as well. But I quickly learned from my Jerry thing, and I was like, listen, I'm going to make sure she likes me more than she likes her boss. So her and I work together more closely than her and her boss, and I can get more what I want.
So who did she report to? Who was her boss?
She reported into our CRO at the time, and I was the VP of global sales. But the vast majority of what she was doing was with my team. And so then what we did is we hired an enablement specialist just for the AEs. And then I got on a really tight rhythm with her. We would meet every 2 weeks. We go through that matrix that we just talked about. We would look over what plans, what programs are we running right now? What individual trainings are we running right now? And then we would work really, really hard to not just train the reps, but to change things in the management cadence that were needed to be changed to reinforce what we were doing the reps. For example, we brought in a new sales methodology. Well, I had to write an entire new how do you run a deal review document. And then I required my sales managers once a quarter to submit a call where I coached my sales managers on how to run a deal review according to the new process. And so that was kind of how we operationalized it is we had regular meetings with someone dedicated to my function. We reviewed the plans and where we were at, what was going on. We looked at a quarter or 2 out and aligned that to product releases and all that kind of stuff. Used the matrix to prioritize and cut things out and said no to probably way too much, but that means that we really executed well on the yeses. And then I absolutely interrupted how my managers manage their teams to incorporate the new things that we were teaching and asking the reps to, because enablement dies at the frontline manager. If the frontline manager doesn't change how they do stuff, the reps don't change how they do stuff. And the whole definition to me of leadership is one thing: efficacy, the ability to affect change. Can you get somebody to change their mindset, their behaviors, how they work, how they think, their energy around the office? If you can't do that, then you don't get to be a leader in my org. And so I teach those frontline managers how to take the enablement we're doing and get them to use that to change rep behavior.
I think that's fantastic. Ron, when you think about it, I want to stay on this topic because even Deanie mentioned it. How do you make sure that your frontline managers are driving the right process, affecting the right enablement so that the IC, because I hear it time and time again, that the number one point of leverage in an organization is how effective your frontline managers are. So what do you think best practices are to drive efficacy of frontline managers?
Yep. So people will believe, they'll do it more if they see someone who's driving them do it. And so what we did at my last company is every sales leader had to know how to run the entire sales funnel. And in order to be a director, you had to run discovery calls and convert 2 deals into stage 2. And to be a VP, you had to convert 2 deals to stage 3. So you actually had to do it. And then you did your deal review with the CEO. He was our CRO at the time. And they were very public. They were done in front of the sales team. And so they knew my leader screwed up on this. They didn't do very well on this part, and then got coaching and then had to redo it. And it was scorecards and scoreboards on how well each manager was doing. And so it was leading from the front. Like we all had to go do it. And so I think it's very important that we have a good methodology, good sales plays. But I just got done. We were running a campaign. I ran the first 35 discovery calls at really good conversion rates. They're in the 70% range. And so I was proud of that. But I knew what worked. So when I
But did you have good exit criteria, or was it all fluff?
we had very good exit criteria. That I was actually learning was, before I told the reps what the exit criteria was, I needed to learn it myself, because frankly, I didn't actually know. Like, was it just that their timing was good, or they had a problem, or was it multiple problems, or because we sell to a lot of enablement, and enablement, my goodness, it's all over the place where it lives. Like, I think both Deanie and Mark had great ideas. To me, it rolls up to the CRO. It's got to be important and aligned to the challenges at that moment. But we sell, they're in marketing. They're in whoever has the DNA in the company to affect change is where they end up right now. And so a lot of what we were doing was trying to figure out, how do we enable them to go drive this change in the organization, right? Is it a huge change, or is it a micro change? But for me, it's about, how do you get your reps to do it? Live it. Like, get in there, roll up your sleeves, do it, prove it. And that's for any stage change. Any new play we write, we execute it first before we have anyone else do it, so that we know it works.
Let me just stick with you for 2 seconds. So how many,
Sure.
what's your ideal, obviously it probably depends on the deal size and the segment we're selling to, but let's say, when you're thinking about generically, how many stages do you think are appropriate? Do you have a preferred methodology? Are you on Medic or MedPick? Like, let's just do a
Yep.
quick poll of the leaders on this call to figure out what's your preference. What's the playbook that you're implementing when you're running a sales organization?
Yep. So I think about it in terms of like I used the football game analogy a minute ago. So I think about it in terms of trying to win quarters. So I think about, there's a qualification part. So up to stage 2, there's a qualification part. Then there's a running the solution eval part, and then there's a closing the deal part. And in each of those, I don't want more than two to 3 stages in each of those max. So that I know there's a way out of qualification into solution eval, a way in, then there's a way out into closing the deal. And those are where I focus. I focus less on S1 to S2 and more on S2 to S3, because that's a transition from, do we understand what they're trying to do, and can we solve it? Very important, right? Because a lot of people go, oh my God, they're a perfectly qualified prospect. And my answer is, for who? Not for us, because we don't solve that pain. So I want to be very cautious on, do we exit qualification into getting into the product? Can we solve the problem? Once we know we can solve the problem, I want to know that we're now transitioned into some sort of, we've agreed to work together stage. So 2 or 3 in each, no more than, I mean, that comes up to about, 9, including the lost stages, derailed and rejected type things. But active stages, 6 is probably the most that in a sales process.
I love that. That's a great explanation. Deanie, when you're thinking about enabling the team, driving results, driving outcomes, where are the areas where you think there's the biggest challenge? Ron mentioned S2 to S3. So his perspective is moving from, we can solve that problem, let's confirm that we're in a commercial conversation and that you're committed to exchanging money for value. Where do you think the biggest challenges are in terms of where in the sales process enablement is most needed?
Yeah. I mean, I think it depends on like what stage of your business you're at. Like early on at Lattice, we had a qualification challenge because it was an aspirational product. People would come in, they're like, this is awesome, I want to see this. So we see a lot of top of funnel demand, first meetings, discovery we thought we did a good job of, and then just sort of silence. And so we measured deal momentum at every stage, which is how many folks are getting engaged from the prospect side, how many emails are going back and forth, and what is the response times we're seeing, because that was typically a signal of we've done the right thing from going from the intro first meeting set to, okay, they're actually evaluating something, or no, they're just looking at this. And it was important for us to run all meetings well, because we knew that almost 60% of the folks that met with us and didn't buy came back a few quarters later. And so it's important to like show well on that first meeting, regardless of the timing was right or not. And so we had a motto, no bad calls, and we wanted every prospect to have a great first touch experience. But we had a ton of challenge in the first sort of, is this a real buyer? Is the timing right? The qualification from like, yes, they're interested and there is clear alignment, but now they've got to go, HR has to go, go find budget and make the case to all these other business leaders too, because they can't just buy it. Lattice touches every employee. And so the CTO and the CRO have to be on board. The timing has to be right. So that's where we spent a lot of our enablement calories early on.
Did you end up putting in some kind of methodology? Did you input Medic or MedPick? Did you feel like that was, too much for the size of the sales cycle that you were running? How did you address that qualification issue?
Yeah, we had a lightweight Medic because Medic was too much for our contract sizes. It was like $20,000 and just too much at that stage. So we had a scaled down version of it, and we had like 3 fields that were must-haves and others that were like, you get bonus points if you get to it. But the best, the sort of most actionable thing was the deal momentum, like measuring activities and surfacing that for the reps. And we'd use that in our deal reviews and our pipeline meetings, saying, hey, this early stage deal, it's a strong logo, it's a really good fit account on paper. They came in, but the deal momentum is low. Why? Should we be multi-threading? Should we be getting ahead? Because a lot of times people deploy those plays around multi-threading late stage, but at that point you're playing defense and it feels salesy. Versus if you go early, when they first interacted with your company, there's a ton of value. And so that's where we spent a lot of time.
I love that. And I think that point that you just made underscored that too many people are trying to save deals too late in the process. And so much of the work happens at the beginning in terms of how you set the table. Adam asks, can you speak to how response time is tracked and measured? Was that just latency in terms of rep sends an email, how quickly did they get back? Probably something syncing with your CRM so you can measure it objectively.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's response times and how often are we setting up meetings? Because if it's like they do a discovery and then they're like, oh, we'll come back, I don't know when. Or we're just meeting with the same person, they're not adding more people to the conversation, is another sign of like we're just talking to one single person. And of course, like there's unicorn deals that don't follow the norm of what we were seeing on data, but typically you'd have lots of deal momentum, lots of emails going back and forth, more people involved, and it increases as the stages progress as well.
Yeah, that's so important. And
Right.
last question. Oh, go ahead, Ron. Go ahead.
Sam, would you mind if I just want to layer on to that? So one of the things that we've seen, everybody talks about multi-threading, and it's such a great way to make sure you're calibrated in the deal. But imagine in a world where you're multi-threading not just on people, but on the ways that we interact with them. So it's not just, did I go reach out to 3 or 4 different people, but am I touching them email, phone, and LinkedIn? What we're doing as a content delivery provider is we're multi-threading on what we send. So right after the discovery call, the second the discovery call's over, we send the recording of Avoma. We use Avoma. We send the recording clipped, and we send a why us for you guide, basically, right? And we can see instantly, did they open it? And we know on deals where they opened it, our conversion rates are dramatically better than when they don't open it. And so if they don't open it, then we send another video, like a customer case study of somebody did this and you should pay attention to this. And then we see if they open that. Like for us on pricing, our customers, when they send out pricing, what they want to know is, did they look at it? Did they open it? How long did they spend looking at it? But most importantly, did they look at the pricing page versus just the title page? And so that level of multi-threading as well is a really good way to judge your deals and how you're performing. And getting that feedback from your tools is really helpful. I don't ask my reps anymore, did you send it and did they look at it? Did you confirm they got it, right? Like those kind of deal questions don't get asked anymore. So anyway, I just wanted to layer on that.
No, I think you just made an amazing point, and you can actually see, whether through GTM Buddy or other tools, you can see where it's going, which is that AI is going to help summarize, synthesize, and present all of this information in such an easy way so that we can immediately tell is somebody interested or not. Mark, there have been a bunch of different questions about entry and exit criteria. Vidar said, would you give some examples on objective and simple entry criteria for discovery? But I imagine they might also want exit criteria as well. And then there was a question of what are some examples of robust exit criteria across late deal stages? So sounds like something you can rattle off the top of your head. You got 2 per stage. Give us some great examples, and again, try to make them objective.
Yeah. So the first thing is I don't do criteria, I only do exit criteria, but because by definition, when you do the exit criteria, you're the next stage. And
the
I
only
think
place it would matter would be like going into discovery potentially
Yeah.
if you feel like they're not a good fit at all.
I also do a little bit differently than Deanie, and maybe need to change now that she's suggested it is. Probably earlier in the sales cycle, I'm a little bit more subjective. Like my stage 1 exit criteria are identify ATL pain, and then do what we call 3-2-1. Identify 3 people in 2 departments, one of which could be a champion, right? So that's very subjective, right? Like we literally want you to list those, put them in the opportunity, and now we know it. And so our discovery call can include like, how does the buying committee start to look in order to move through the stage? Our stage 3 exit criteria would always be like confirm a required capability. So we use my sales methodology combines force management's command of the message for how to communicate value, Skip Miller's proactive selling on how to communicate value to a specific persona, and then a little bit of stuff that we just custom to me and what we learned at outreach, and I mash those 3 things together into a single one. So required capabilities is a very important part of how we move a deal through the pipeline. And so stage 3 exit criteria are, we need to get an ATL, somebody above the power line, to confirm that the required capabilities.
What's ATL?
ATL is above the line, above the power
line. Above the line. Got it.
Power line. BTL's below the line. ATL's above the line.
We don't like BTLs. No BTLs. Only ATLs.
They can only tell you no, and they can only take you up inside their department. ATL can say yes, and they can take you wide across the org. So it's okay to start BTL as long as you know what you can get out of them. Don't expect them to do something that they can't do, right? So we get ATL, someone above the power line, to confirm that our required capabilities are what are part of the evaluation criteria. And a lot of times what we end up doing is sending our list of buying criteria to the buyers, because most people aren't putting this together. And we say, will you use, because this is helpful, can you use this to run your evaluation? 90% of people want a guided selling experience. Is exactly the kind of expertise they're looking for. And when you tune it just a touch to what their needs are, it really looks like you're doing a very customized sales experience. And over my career at Outreach and Catalyst, even before those companies, like I consistently get emails about how differentiated my sales experience is that I architect, and this is one reason why. And then the second thing that we get to do is we make sure that an ATL person has signed off on a mutual action plan. And so what steps have we done so far? Let's show them the work they've done so far, because don't forget, we're in stage 3. We should be a lot of the way through the deal. And then what's left to do? And we get them to agree and sign off on that. So those are 2 very, again, those are more objective things that are a little more tangible. And this is what I love about them. I can train somebody to be lethal at pitching and getting someone to agree to a mutual action plan. It's something that you can master. It's a tight little skill. And so now I've found that the number 1 skill deficit of every seller I hire is nobody trained them how to move a deal through a pipeline. They know how to do discovery. They know how to do negotiations. They know how to do this. They know how to plan their territory, but they have no clue about the concept of moving a deal through the pipeline. And so what I've done about the exit criteria is I've used MedPick and other things to create the exit criteria that are distinct skills that a rep can master through repetition and training in a program. And so, you want to learn how to do a map? Let me show you what a map is. Let me show you how to pitch it so people want to do it. Let me show you how to construct it so people want to agree to it. And let me show you, once they've agreed to it, how to hold them accountable to. That's like distinct, tiny little easy things to train on and figure out. And so that's what makes that process so important and so beneficial.
I think that's just awesome advice. Ron, if you're thinking of, so you mentioned S2 to S3, are there specific skills to Mark's point? I love how he framed it, which is, it feels like it's a way of saying what you said as well, which is moving the deal through the pipeline is perhaps the biggest challenge as you scale, maybe not discovery. Do you agree with that? And what are the specific things you do to help reps move the deal through the pipeline? Like, how do you coach them to do that?
Yeah. So, I mean, first you need a rubric. You need something to go back and look at, right? To know why they're getting stuck in that specific stage. That's why I broke it up into the 3: qualification, solution eval, and close, because then I knew specifically what I was coaching on. Our biggest challenge was at a lot of the companies I've been at is after the demo's done and people don't fall asleep, or no one ever collapses, no one ever falls asleep in demos. I guess it's happened. But everybody leaves feeling like they did a good job. The question we would ask at the end of solution eval is, could you see yourself using my product? Such a simple question but what it tells you is, and what we would teach the reps is, if you ask them the question and they say yes, then you get them to agree that you're done evaluating the product. Say, great, now we're leaving this stage. Guess what? I'm moving you to a stage where we're going to need to now involve joining the two companies together. And so it's stuff like that, which is, I would look and listen for, we used Gong at the time. I would listen for that question. I had a little marker set up, and I would get an email every time someone said it. And I would go, awesome, congrats to the whole group. This deal's moving this stage. So things like that make it really easy to identify and coach on what you want. And then you just have to have CRM hygiene to get people to actually update it and put it in there. But those are some of the things, because people get stuck doing repetitive demos. My God, 7, 8 demos on a simple product is insane.
Deanie,
can I just add?
Yeah, please.
I was just gonna add to one thing to what Ron said, which is one of the other things we saw is like actually coaching reps to close lost deals often enough, because that was the other big challenge we'd see. We'd be like, oh no, they're gonna buy. It's just not now. When? We don't know, but they're gonna buy. I know it. It's like they really liked it. We had a great demo. We had great discovery. We have all this notes. We have all this, we're having these conversations, and then you again go back to deal momentum, and you're like, well, we haven't had a conversation. We haven't heard back from all the amazing emails you've sent and calls the voicemails you've left for 2 months. And so we at some point got good enough where we knew that at every stage this was the drop off per rep per team. And so if folks weren't closing lost deals, we knew something's off, and they again aren't their deal radar isn't there. And so we coach our managers because the opportunity cost of working dead deals is just too high. And I think that is another area that there's not a lot of talk around it, but I think there's the reps aren't coached to opportunity cost, but I think that is a big unlock for time.
I completely agree with you, Deanie. And I think it's like human psychology, which is that there's loss aversion that's coming into play. And reps don't understand. Reps always assume that they have kind of unlimited capacity, and they don't understand that they have limited capacity during the day. So they don't see the cost of keeping a deal open that should be closed. They feel like if there's a 1% chance I can keep it open, not understanding that effectively in one way or the other, but they don't believe it, that's preventing them from working the next good opportunity that comes into their pipeline in the most appropriate way. You agree with that, Ron?
Oh. Yeah. And so what I did 2 companies ago is I couldn't drive that point home. People just thought opportunities were like their gift, right?
Yeah, they're just reminder notes.
Yep.
Right. And I'm like, it's not your opportunity, it's the company's opportunity, right? Like I own the opportunity. And so what I did is and our cost per opportunity at the time was about $3,000. And so at one of the sales meetings, I opened it by bringing $3,000 of cash, and I put it on a table. And I said, I'm going to walk out for 30 seconds. I'd like to know who of you has the want to steal my $3,000. And they all looked at me like I was crazy. I left and came back. And I said, no one stole it. They said, no one's going to steal from you. You're our boss. And I said, great. Our cost per opportunity is $3,000, but you constantly don't work my opportunities. It's stealing from me the exact same as if I put this pile of money there. People have repeated that story over and over and over again. And they know that it's very important to treat opportunities through the funnel. It's never, like Deanie said, there's no bad call. There's no bad meeting. You don't know who's going to buy. You can't prejudge. And so you have to use the plays, the stages, the micro conversions to help drive these things through. Otherwise, you're stealing someone's $3,000.
That is fantastic. I love the creativity there. You're a great storyteller, Ron. Mark, I interrupted you. What were you going to say?
I was going to say I have a very tactical way to help with closing out ops, and I have a very rigorous. I might have said that word like 10,000 times. I swear I'm not like a micromanager. Maybe I am, but like, listen,
I think you probably are.
I use the next step process for this. So In our deal review, every single week, we go over about 7 or 8 different data points for every single deal in the pipeline, and we make sure that they're right. And we do that by constructing a sentence where the rep or the manager says to the rep what the data in Salesforce is telling that person. So for example, Deanie, this is a stage 2 deal, which means that you're trying to quantify the business initiatives and make sure that you book the demo. Are those the 2 things that you're trying to do right now? Because that's what stage 2 designates. Oh, I already booked the demo. Okay, great. Did you quantify business pain? Nope. Then you're still in stage 2. All right. And you're saying that you have it in best case, which means that we have a deal and we have a timeline and you have a risk assessment of yellow risk against that, which means that there's risk here that you're trying to call out. You're worried about overcoming it, but you will forecast the deal because you believe you can overcome the risk. And this deal is supposed to close at $50,000 on June 1st. Is all that accurate? Because that's what you're communicating with the data in Salesforce right now. And we do that. My managers say that sentence for every deal, every single week. Guess what happens after 2 or 3 months? The reps now understand what stages mean, what forecast categories mean, what we're using close dates and amounts for, and the data gets a lot tighter. Then the second step is we say, all right, so since we know you're in stage 2 and you're trying to book a demo or quantify the business initiatives, do you have a meeting set up to do that? If you don't have a meeting set up to do it, it ain't getting done, right? So I don't care what else you got planned. I know you got to get out of this stage. So I need to make sure you have a booked for these exit criteria. Do you have that booked? Then if they say yes, all right, then we work on when's the meeting and what can we do prior to the meeting to get them juiced to come to the meeting and be super prepared when we get there, right? So if the meeting's out 2 weeks, we don't do nothing and just sit there for 2 weeks. We get them pumped for that meeting in 2 weeks so they show up, right? We sell the meeting again and again until they show up. If they don't have a meeting, then we say, all right, what are you going to do to get a meeting? And then whatever those things are, we log them in next steps. And then every week, the first question after we construct the sentence is, last week you said you were going to do X. Did you do that? On the first week, if they say no, no problem. Sometimes it takes longer to do stuff like this than a week. But I'm wondering, did you put in the effort? Did you make a phone call or email to go do this? All right, so we're checking to make sure the effort's there. Then the next week we come in like, hey, you said that you're going to do this 2 weeks ago. Did you get it done? If the answer is no, then we might need to change tactics. I'm assuming you've been calling and emailing. Now we need to go try something else, an executive connection, coming in through a LinkedIn warm lead, using a referral, whatever plays you run when you can't get something scheduled for 2 weeks for a deal that's supposed to be in your pipeline and moving forward. On the third week, we say, did you get this meeting booked? If they didn't, now we say, listen, we're either doing the wrong thing doing it with the wrong person, or we don't have a deal. So you need to tell me a new person and a new thing we can do, or we're losing this deal and moving on. And then at the fourth week, they still haven't got it done with the new thing. We immediately close the deal. The deal is done. And you can reopen it. You listen, that's great. Keep nurturing them, keep doing it. But we're closing that deal. That sales opportunity after not moving forward for a month is now closed. If you can reopen it, you create a new opportunity. And I'm personally willing to take a 3 to 5 percentage point hit on my win rates to have only fresh opportunities inside my pipeline. And that's what happens when you do this is your win rate's going to go down because you're being more aggressive with close lost, but you're making sure that pipeline is super fresh.
I love that.
Yep.
We're almost at the end of our time together. This has been an incredible session. One last question for me, thought-provoking question, but Gartner has the stat, a lot of people reference the stat that X% of people don't want to use a seller, don't want to talk to a seller in a sales process. But it feels to me, based on this conversation, like sellers are still critically necessary in order to help the buyer navigate the journey. Sort of a loaded question, but agree or disagree? Ron, I see you nodding your head. It just feels like the death of the salesperson is a little bit oversold relative to what's necessary to help complex organizations navigate their own buying process, when a lot of buyers don't even understand how to buy software in the first place. Yeah,
the reason I'm saying that is the analogy I always use is when we go to the doctor, everybody said, oh, we don't get personal time with our doctors. Well, because they were doing mundane stuff. So we offloaded some of the mundane stuff to other people who could do it. They weigh you in, they take your blood pressure. No reason for a doctor to do that. That way, the doctor's actually being a doctor. Well, guess what? In today's world, I think the stat is something like 17% of the buyer's journey is done live with a person. We better darn well be stars for that 17% that we're working with the person. And the people we're working with, they want to talk to somebody. They need to get those answers. What they don't want is uneducated reps who are repeating the same questions and asking, when are you thinking about buying? And tell me about your pain. It's like, I already did all that. Like, I think, where did I see it? Oh, somebody posted on LinkedIn. It was a CRO looking for a product. And he's like, I went to the SDR. The SDR gave me the sales rep. They asked the same questions. All I wanted was a demo. No value add. So that's the thing, is what people are looking for is educated reps, people who know more than they do, right? Because they're filling in gaps on what they don't know. And so I'll do one quick plug on the change of enablement in the last year. We went from enablement of doing meetings to enablement of using systems. Now we're doing real-time enablement. And it's like a quarterback being in the huddle, listening to their coach. And I'm not talking about the cockpit style where it pops up every time. When it's important and it's a part of the conversion that needs to happen, they need that answer at that moment. And them getting it is a change of whether they move the deal or not. And so that's the enablement. That's what reps need, is to be educated and smarter than their prospect. And they only need to do it 17% of the time on the deal. So that's why I was not.
Deanie, any last thoughts? Number one piece of expert advice for people trying to implement the right enablement strategy, process, solution so that they can improve their win rates.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was going to add to Ron's point around the reps not going anywhere, but
Yeah.
it's you have to train your reps. And one of the mottos we had was the number one thing we sell is the fact that we care, and that goes to every team, every rep, and it matters. And you care about the prospect's time, so you do your research. You care about their business, so you understand their challenges on how this deal is going to go through. Enablement cares about the team and the prospect. So I think it all starts with, if you build a team that truly cares and you train them and enable them with the right pieces, especially with real-time enablement, for the love of AI, please, all the founders listening, focus on admin work, helping reps. Don't replace reps, because I don't think that's going to work. You're just going to waste calories doing it.
It's not going to work. Mark, parting thoughts?
Yeah, listen, I think that I saw something that Todd Capone, who wrote the Transparency Sale. I did a little cartoon. Yeah, and he it was like from 1893, and it was like, hey, guess what? We're going to get rid of all of our salespeople and replace them with this telephone or something like that. And it was so. Listen, this has been the bombardment for years. Guess what? They're also getting rid of factory workers. They're also getting rid of, whatever, a million other jobs that still exist. So I think we're all safe. I think really what the statement is, Sam, isn't I don't like sales. It's I don't like bad salespeople.
Yeah.
And so if you want to make sure that sales stays a function in your company, don't let your team suck at it. That's pretty much how simple it is.
Boom. Mic
Yeah.
drop. And with that, thank you, Deanie. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Ron. What an amazing conversation. The thing I loved about it was just how many practical, tactical insights all of you shared. Ron, that example of the $3,000 in cash was fantastic. You all are awesome. If anybody wants to learn more about Pavilion, go to joinpavilion.com. We have thousands of conversations like this every day within our Slack community and within our member hub. Otherwise, we'll see all of you on social media, where we'll be sharing our insights freely, abundantly, and clearly with everybody out in the world. Thanks so much for joining us. And also, there was a question, is this being recorded? Use the same URL you used to come here in the first place, and you can rewatch it, send it to your boss, send it to your CEOs, etc., etc. But thanks everybody for joining. We're so glad to have you. Bye.
Bye.